thank you, Amy. Thank you for such a wonderful introduction as well. And I want to thank everyone for attending today as well. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day. And we look forward to sharing some great information to help you and your nonprofits. And I'll share more about myself and Updenity in just a moment. But I do want to share with you kind of the agenda for today so you know what's going to be coming throughout the next little bit. We're going to be talking about some specific survey results of surveys that we've done, and we want to let you know about those because those will be very instrumental in sharing the results of those as far as a summary as well. We're also going to be sharing some insights on reaching supporters and grant opportunities, and those are very exciting grant opportunities, and some of you may be aware of them and some of you may not. And so we're going to go from the standpoint as if you've never heard of some of these things before, just to make sure that we cover our ground very well. So, again, sit back, relax, enjoy, and we'll begin here and share a little bit more about Updenity. Updenity is an international marketing firm, and we do online advertising solutions for nonprofits. That's very centric of what we do, is working with nonprofits. We've been in business since 2006. About myself, as Amy's already said, I have 20-plus years of experience in and with non-marketing, or in and with nonprofits, specifically in the areas of marketing, strategic planning. I'm the board member of 2 different boards, and so I know intricately how boards function, how nonprofits function, and so that gives me a little bit of insight on the for-profit and non-for-profit side as well. Why did we conduct the study that we did? Well, it was to learn and share which marketing activities and methods are most successful. Because some of the things that we've seen from nonprofits is everybody has a different desire, everybody has different needs, they market different, they use different methods, but they also have different activities. Some like events, some don't, some have donations, some don't. We've seen people have donate buttons on their website and some that don't. So there's all kinds of different activities that they do. So we wanted to kind of encapsulate and incorporate both marketing methods and activities. Second reason we did the study was to help nonprofits reach new supporters, because I can be completely honest with you. As I said, I'm a board member of 2 different boards, and what it really comes down to is we need supporters. We need new supporters financially and in their volunteer efforts, and that's really what it kind of boils down to. So the last reason we also did the study was to inspire nonprofits to increase the reach of their message and mission. Amy shared with me very briefly kind of a headline of different groups that have joined us today, and we have a broad sector of nonprofit organizations with us today. And just looking through them, I kind of recognize some and what their general missions are. And some are international, some are very local. And so we wanted to inspire you to be able to reach out farther with your message and your mission. That was the last reason, and probably the most important reason, to be honest. Now, the study results. We conducted a study over a 4-month period of time. And again, we did the study with a diverse group of nonprofits, such as you that are joining us today. So it wasn't just one sector or one group, so we had good information that way. They all had various missions and goals. We're glad we had that. They were using different methods of advertising, and some focused on 1 or 2, some used 3 or 4, and that was great. That helped us pull in the information that was very usable and helpful. And the last one is they all had different various activities. We found that there's about 13 to 14 general activities that nonprofits generally do, but not every nonprofit uses all of them, of course. They may use 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, but nobody uses all of them. But when we took all the information in, there was about 14 different activities that they used, and we'll share about those as we go along. We're going to jump right into the details of the actual study itself right now. I don't want you to get hung up so much on the numbers. We put them in a graph form so you can kind of see them, but I want you to get the feel of kind of how this is working. You'll see some things crop up again and again. There'll be some very consistent things that you'll see. For instance, one of the first methods of marketing that we found that people use is direct mail. And what we did was we broke it down into what was the most successful activities when you use direct mail, and what were the least successful activities when you use direct mail, and the other methods of marketing I'll share here in a moment. But it was the most successful activities and the least successful activities when you consider the time and effort and money that you had to put into them to make them happen. Okay, that's what we considered, and that's what we asked. And what we found out is in direct mail, donations was the number one successful activity they found using direct mail, 29%, and then it went down to newsletters and awareness. Now, as I show you what was the least successful here, as we add that to the slide, it's going to be a little bit of an interesting thing here because you see newsletters and donations were also in the least successful activities as well as the most successful. And I know that may seem like a little bit of an oddity, but let me take the time just very briefly to explain why that is. And here's the reason why. Most nonprofits, as you'll see when we summarize here, most nonprofits are focusing on about 4 or 5 different activities: donations, awareness, newsletters, and a couple others are the top 5, or in the top 5. And so when you're focusing on those, and that's your purpose of why you're using a marketing method, it would stand to reason if you had great success, you're going to say, yeah, we had good success. But if you didn't reach the level that you wanted, you would kind of come back with the answer of saying, we didn't have the success we wanted. So they can crop up in both the most successful and least successful for that reason. But there's one other reason, and that is we had a preponderance of more positive feedback in the most successful activities. For instance, here, I'll just give you an example. Donations may have had, as a most successful activity, may have had 100 respondents totally for a positive thing, and donations was 29 out of that 100, so the 29%. But only about 10 people had responded back, 10 organizations responded back, that they had some form of least successful activity, and it just so happened that donations was in that group, but 19% represents about 2 out of the 10. So by far there were many more positive things that happened with all the marketing methods than the negative that happened, but they still show up. That's why they show up in both places. So I wanted to clear that up right at the beginning. So direct mail, there's what we found from those, and as we go through, you'll see the different things that we found as well here with phone. Phone is still being used in a lot of cases. Again, the most successful activities were donations, awareness, and event attendance. You'll start to see a pattern as we go through that there's kind of the same similar ones over and over again that are the most successful. Volunteers was a close fourth, picking up the phone and saying, hey, would you help volunteer at our activity, things like that. That's what the phone is still being used for. Least successful was event attendance, newsletters, and volunteers. And again, the reasons I already gave you as to why they could be in both the most successful and least successful apply to all of these. But the ones that stuck out here a little bit to me were newsletters. Obviously, that makes sense. You're trying to get people to get on an email newsletter, but you're using the phone to do it when they're already apt to wanting to be emailed. They're a tech person. So we found some things like that. Now, as far as email is concerned, one of the best successes that we had, considering time and money, that people shared with us was getting people to an event, using email to get them to an event, awareness, and donations. Again, you start to see this pattern over and over again. And again, we see an email here, as far as the least successful, was getting people to kind of connect with them on social media and donations and volunteers. And that social media stuck out because people like to use Facebook or Twitter or some of these other forms of social media. And so that's one that kind of stood out to us with the email, that it was a little bit of the least successful activity when they're trying to use email to get people to connect and engage with them. And one of the last ones we'll share about is the website. And this is on purpose here to show you, because the power of the website we're going to share with you a little bit here in a moment. But when people use their website in various ways, the most successful activities they had were bringing awareness as to what they do, telling your story. That is the key. That is absolutely the key, is telling your story. Donations was next. Event attendance was after that. And then as far as the least successful was donations, memberships, and awareness. That membership stuck out to us, again, as we combined all the information. There are some nonprofits that utilize memberships. Could be like a YMCA or some things like that, similar organizations that have memberships. They didn't have a great success getting people to become members when they were simply just using a website, that there needed to be some other connection involved. Right? Now, as far as kind of summarizing, and that's what I wanted to get to, the summary is kind of the most important part here. I gave you those numbers just to kind of show you there is an actual train of thought that you can start to see develop. most successful activities across all the marketing methods, whether you use the phone, whether you use the direct mail, whether you use the website or email, doesn't matter. When you took everything into consideration, what we found is the most successful activities that nonprofits had were donations, awareness, event attendees, volunteers, and newsletters. And that was in that order. These are in the order that they represented. The other one, as far as least successful, to give you an idea that nonprofits said, were getting people to be members of their organization in some way, shape, or form, online store sales, space rentals, and that would be maybe like a camp that rents out their camp to people, auctions and testimonials, gathering testimonials. These are what nonprofits told us. Now, does this mean that your organization doesn't have success in selling something online, for instance, or renting space? Absolutely not. It certainly doesn't. But it's just telling us overall this is where they found the most success and the least successful. So as you move forward, we want you to be able to utilize this information to say this is what other nonprofits are finding success in. In other words, I boil it down real simple. I like simple language. What's working and what's not. And that's really the important part. What's working and what's not. So let me share a little bit of insights on reaching supporters, because that's really ultimately what every nonprofit is about. Our research found that the most successful marketing activities have one common thread. No matter what you use, there was one common thread. Most of the supporters, whether they volunteer or donors, doesn't matter, they connected online. That's where they connected. They really had a connection online. Supporters are usually directed towards a website, and that's also what we found from the information. In other words, somebody told them specifically to go to your website. They gave them the website address. It was in a flyer. It was a friend of a friend telling them where to go. See, the problem, though, exists is very few people just stumble on a website. They are usually directed there, and that's what we found. And we found that very interesting and very helpful to know that. So the thing that we talk about is online advertising, and we asked the question, why do nonprofits shy away from online advertising? And what we found is simply this. By talking to the nonprofits, my experience as well as the nonprofit world, and talking to other nonprofits, of course, the reasons were lack of experienced staff. When you start getting to online, their technical expertise joins in that. They didn't have the staff available, whether they could pay or volunteer. They have limited technical experience of how to make it actually work, because it's not just putting out a little post on Facebook. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something much bigger, larger, and more effective. There's also the consideration of unallocated budget. Well, if we didn't know that it existed, for instance, we wouldn't allocate a budget item towards it. So that was another reason. And the last one is simply the fear of the unknown, and that's for every one of us in all areas of our life. Something that we don't understand, we don't know about it, we kind of have a tendency to fear a little bit, so we shy away from it. So that's the last reason there. The biggest thing I want you to get from this slide right here is if you look to the right, this is a huge, staggering statistic. Today, 75% of the supporters go online to determine where they give their time and their money. So 75% of the supporters that you could have, potential new supporters, they're going online to figure out where to give their time as a volunteer or their money as a donor. So the question I always ask is, are you meeting them there? Are you where they're at? So online visibility is critical. Not only do they want to know about you, they want to know how to connect with you and reach and engage with you. That's where they're at. Here's the biggest problem we find with websites. And I told you we were going to talk about websites specifically because they're such a huge part. They're kind of a central hub, if you will. The biggest problem that we find is this. Most websites are just a billboard in the desert. Again, if somebody has to be directed to a website by a person or by a printed material, then it's really a billboard in the desert. There's not a lot of people seeing it. They stumble across it maybe once in a while, but they're getting there from some other resource, some other person. What we need to do is take the website from the billboard, as being a billboard in the desert, to being a billboard in Times Square, where everybody can see it. You see, it's critical to have people come to your website, and here's the reason why. They want to reach, connect, and engage with you, and that's the avenue people are taking. They want to do it online, and that is the key. They're online looking already, and let's be honest, I think everybody would probably agree if I could see if people raise their hands, if you could raise your hands and I could see them, not only do people look to where they give their money, that 75% or their time, but people are going online to find the answers to life's problems, everything from getting a car fixed to maybe getting marriage help or family help. They go online for everything, and that's where we need to be so we can engage with them and tell the story. I cannot emphasize enough, telling your story is the key. You can have the most beautiful, most up-to-date, most technical website, but if people don't know you're there and they can't find you, it's like the billboard in the desert. I want to give you a quick illustration here of some things that Updenity did with a couple of smaller nonprofits. It works for big and small alike, but we on purpose chose some smaller ones just to show you the power of what can happen. Now, the two different organizations that we worked with here both had very similar numbers. They were almost exactly the same, to be honest, so we combined them as an average just to show you. There's one here called the Dixie Sternwheeler. That's here in Indiana. It's an old paddle boat, and there's a local community center. Both of them combined were receiving less than 250 website visitors per week. But after we worked with them, what happened is they're now getting between 1,100 and 2,100 visitors per week. That's a 400 to 800% increase, and that is by just simply the search. That's not being directed there by a friend or a family member or something else. That's simply by searching online. They also weren't promoting their missions through the most commonly used search tool, which is Google. And we're going to get very specific about Google in just a minute or two. But because of doing that, though, now they're promoting their mission to over 150,000 potential new supporters every week. That's an incredible number, an incredible expansion from what they were doing. Now, I know we've passed the holidays, and we're kind of past that quite a bit already a little bit, but I still want to ask the question, does anybody like some pie? Well, you see that picture there on your screen of the person holding that pie. It's one of my favorites, the pumpkin pie. But supporters and income are the pie, okay? There's only so much pie to go around, though, right? That's what we think. There's only so much time. There's only so many volunteers. There's only so much money. So our pie is there. And all of a sudden what starts to happen is we start to slice our pie a little thinner. We have to make things go a little farther. And that's what generally happens. But more than ever, nonprofits today, we're asked to do a lot more with a lot less. So it seems like the pie is getting smaller and smaller while we're asked to do more and serve more. So the question is should we do less and serve less? And I say no. I think we need to change that thinking and saying we need to do more. Just how do we make that happen? And that's the answer is pretty simple in a certain way, is to simply say have a bigger pie. We've got to increase the size of the pie. And that's where the online advertising and marketing comes in. It increases the size of the pie. It captures so many more people that are maybe local, but certainly regional and national that might connect with us in our organization. They don't have to live down the street and know about us. They could be in California. They could be in New York. It doesn't matter. And on one of our survey questions, we asked people to talk about imagine what you would do with $3 million. Tell us what you would do with that. And just like those of you attending today, I'm sure, I have a feeling that many of you are looking at expanding your services. I also have a feeling that many of you are saying we'd like to expand not only our services but our staff. So obviously you could serve more. Or a building, maybe a building campaign. Or maybe even expanding to international venues of doing what you're doing. We've had people give us all kinds of answers. The answer is not to do less. It's have a bigger pie. That really is critical. I want to share briefly before we get into the last part about grants. We're going to share a few minutes on grants here in just a moment because that's really what kind of makes this all happen. That's the trigger that makes things work. But let me give you a little bit of idea about online trends as far as donations because, as I said, being honest, when we boil everything down, we are here to serve people in our nonprofits, just as I do on the boards that I'm on. We serve people. That is our main mission, our goal. But we know it takes people and money. And so we want volunteers and we need the donations to make those things happen. But here's online trends for donations. Online giving was up 14% in 2013. And there was about almost a 25% retention of a first-year donor from that. In other words, what that means is somebody gave whatever amount that first year. Well, about 25% of those people who gave stayed with them over and over again and are continuing to be a donor, not just one time. Then 84% of Gen Yers, that's that mid-20s to maybe mid-30s, close to 40-ish, that group, they either donated online or wanted to donate online via a website. That was their preferred method, 84%. And so if we don't have that availability, which we run into, believe it or not, we run into nonprofits all the time that don't have the donate button to set up to do that. That's what people are looking for, because you've connected with them online in some way, and now they're saying, I'd like to give. And so that's what that generation wants to do. 40% of all respondents, though, to this survey said they donated between $1 and $50, and another 23% said they gave between $51 and $100. Average gift in 2012, online, online, not a check, not in person, not at an event, but online, was $77. And I think we could all use in our nonprofits that we work with, we would like to have a bunch of those online $77 gifts. Here's something that I found staggering from this particular study that we pulled the information from was not all online gifts are less than $100. There were 5 organizations that reported gifts of over $100,000 in 2013. That means somebody went online and entered the amount online of $100,000 or more. One, I believe, was upwards of $150,000 online. They did it that way. They didn't write a check. So if we don't have that availability and we're not connecting with them there, we don't have that opportunity to get them involved with our organizations. So how can you increase your online visibility? And here's where we come kind of to the final section of what we're going to be talking about today, and that is the grant opportunities, because that's exactly how you can reach out. Whether you have a good budget, a small budget, a large budget, it doesn't matter. There's some online grant opportunities available to you, and that's exactly what we want to share with you, because I believe we shared the importance of showing why you need to be online and advertising online, but how can you make that happen? It's through the grant opportunities. Some of you, again, may have heard of this. Some of you may have already tried or been involved in this. And probably a good percentage of you don't even know that it exists at this point until we've talked today, but Google, the largest search engine in the world, Google offers online advertising grants for eligible 501c3s, okay? And that very well could be you. There's a $120,000 annual grant available. It's actually $10,000 a month that recurs every single month from Google, and you get to utilize that grant to get yourself online, to get yourself visible so people can see you, know you exist, that give awareness to those people, and that they can reach, connect, and engage with you. Google's offered that to 501c3s who are eligible. That is something fantastic. And we are, Denny is a certified Google AdWords partner as we work with them on that. Now, a little bit as far as Denny itself, just to give you an idea kind of some of the things that we do to help that. We make it very easy. Denny, we have a program, the AdGrant Program, we make it easy. Google AdWords can be very complex. It really can. It's time-consuming. It's competitive, but we make it easy. We do have, as far as what we do for our clients, we have a money-back guarantee on that $120,000 grant acceptance. We have a minimum of 3,000 click-throughs per quarter guarantee, and as if you remember, I told you about those 2 small nonprofits. We're getting 250 website visitors per week. Now they're getting well over 1,000 to 2,000 per week, that 400 to 800% increase. We just gave it a minimum here, but it's usually much more than that. And as I said, we are a Google-certified AdWord expert. We help people save time and money as well, because people don't have the staff and don't have the expertise to go out and do that, and that's what we help with. Also, to let you know, we are ad compliant with the IRS and Google themselves, because Google has some very specific specifications that you have to meet on a month-to-month basis to make sure you retain the grant, because that grant goes on for as long as you want it, year to year, but it's done on a monthly basis, and we make sure that those things happen. We also have a method for optimizing ad campaigns, kind of behind the scenes, because Google has algorithm programs and all that stuff, and we make sure that we can compete with that and make sure we're in structure with them as well. Quick review. Online advertising for nonprofits really isn't a luxury anymore. It's really a necessity. I just told somebody the other day, I can't say even it's a trend of the future, because it's here now. being online and advertising online is no longer a future thing. It's a now thing, and we have to be there because we're competing with other nonprofits. We're competing with for-profits, and that's where everyone is online, and we need to be there to meet them. All methods of advertising have value. When we first started today, we talked about basically some different methods. We talked about the phone, we talked about website, we talked about email, we talked about direct mail. All of those have great value, and there's nothing wrong with those. But online advertising, what it is, it's kind of at the top of the list. It acts like a funnel. It gets a larger group of people in to connect with us so that we can actually use those other methods of advertising to engage with them once we've already connected with them. Then they become part of a mailing list or a phone list. And so then we can use those other things, but it reaches out to connect with them, and that's what it really does. And the trends reveal that online advertising really is the key to growing the pie. We simply need to grow the pie instead of having a small pie. So what now? Well, the question we always simply ask is, would you like to grow your pie? And would a $120,000 advertising grant from Google help you? Would it help your organization? For most organizations, I say probably the answer is yes. They can absolutely utilize that grant month to month to expand and reach new people. Now, what we usually do is simply ask people to do this. You usually have a lot of questions, and we're going to take some times for questions today. No problem there at all. But there's usually questions after that, so you've got a contact information for me here on the right side of the screen. It's got my phone number. It's got my email. But one of the first things you can do, a great first step, is to actually go to the left side of the screen where it says, has updenity.com eligible? You can check to see if your organization is eligible for the grant. You can go there, and it's pretty easy to do. It doesn't take but just a couple of minutes to do, and you can find out. Now, the drawback is here, you can't click on those links on your screen. I wish we could find a way to do that. You actually have to copy them or write them down and put them into a search box. You can't just click them. They won't work that way. So I'm going to leave this screen up. Actually, I'm going to come back to it here in just a moment for you in case you need to write it down. I want to give you time to do that. But I want to end very quickly here as I put that back up, which is a big thank you. It is an honor to have been here with Third Sector today and Amy, as well as all of you who've attended today. I really do count it as an honor to have spent some time with you. Time is our most valuable resource we have because once you spend it, you can't get it back. So I want to thank you for sharing your time with us.